Once the two of them eliminate the wyverns on their path, Ryo tells Abel he wouldn't have minded facing more of them. Abel asks him not to joke about that, although he thinks it's great they got so many magic stones from those monsters. Following that, he indicates that they have indeed journeyed quite far north, though he's not entirely certain of their exact location. Ryo asks if this is the Buji Empire, but Abel clarifies it isn't. The empire is further north, making it impossible. Hearing that, Ryo is quite relieved, which makes Abel wonder why he hates it so much. Ryo clarifies that he has nothing against the empire, he just thinks its name is awful. At that very moment, his gaze falls upon a distant path, and as Abel observes him indicating westward, his focus then shifts toward the mountains situated in a particular direction. Ryo asks him if something is wrong, noticing his change in expression, but Abel replies it's nothing and points out that if they follow that path west, they should arrive at Kailadi village. While they're making their way there, he tells Ryo that the food in Kailadi village is incredibly delicious, and there's a particular dish he's eager to recommend to him, which makes Ryo even more excited. That night, they go to a tavern where Abel talks about the Adventurers Guild, believing Ryo's strength warrants his registration. A guild card functions as identification, granting him entry into any town or even nation he visits. Then he reminds him that upon their arrival, he had to answer for Ryo to pay a silver coin, as this is the standard procedure when someone is an outsider. But Ryo asks him if he's involved in strange things and implies that the silver coin is meant to buy him and reduce him to a servant. However, because Abel asks if he sees him as a criminal, Ryo tells him he doesn't, as he sees him as a knight who wouldn't protest over a few coins. To return to the topic, Abel says going to the guild has other perks, as they buy magic stones and monster materials at a good price. After all, those materials are only useful if one is an alchemist. Ryo is surprised to hear that, but when he tries to ask for more details, the waitress arrives to deliver their order, a dish called curry. The moment Ryo sees it, he's in shock. This is because curry is a staple in reincarnation stories. He's living his own isekai story and he can't believe it. He slowly starts to get carried away by his isekai-obsessed side, but when Abel asks if something's wrong, he snaps back to normal as if nothing happened. When he finally takes a bite of the curry, Ryo reacts with delight and doesn't hesitate to eat faster. After that, he orders another plate and asks Abel if they also have this curry in Loon City, to which he says yes. The next day, the two continue their journey towards the city. Since Ryo holds curry in such high regard, he asks Abel if there's anything else important he might have forgotten to mention. This makes Abel a little tense, but Ryo hopes he'll confess to having a sweet tooth or something like that, and expects him to show him the finest sweets in the area. From that point onward, they continue their long journey, and eventually they glimpse Loon City far off in the distance. Upon reaching the entrance, a guard recognizes Abel, who is named Naimur, expressing surprise as it was reported that Abel had gone missing. Abel confirms that indeed that was precisely what occurred, and he was able to return completely unharmed, all thanks to Ryo, this young man right here. Naimur thanks him for that, and after receiving the silver coin for his entry, they start chatting amicably. Meanwhile, Ryo watches them, looking a little happy, as he thinks it's great that Abel is so well received upon his return. Inside the city, Abel tells him they'll head to the guild first. Since they'll be together, he can boost Ryo's rank upon registration, but Ryo, knowing nothing about it, asks for more details. Abel explains that upon guild registration you're F rank, but with a B rank or higher adventurer's recommendation, you can begin as E or D. Because of this, Ryo assumes he's B rank or higher and feels proud of that. Abel doesn't understand what he means. But getting back to the topic, he says that with a higher rank you can accept more difficult quests, and those are the ones that give better rewards. Though he doubts he has to worry about money, he even believes that selling all those magic stones he carries could completely disrupt the market, even lowering their value. However, he is sure the guildmaster can do something about it. As soon as they enter the guild, the receptionist recognizes him and calls out his name loudly, which causes a chain reaction with everyone present, as they all know him too. Abel's a rock star. What can I say? In seconds, he's surrounded by people happy to see him back, and seeing his popularity, Ryo decides to step outside so as not to bother them. As he moves a little away from the guild, he happens to see an elf walk past him, and when she stares at him, she recognizes that his clothes are from the Fairy King. And when she sees Ryo get flustered by that, she apologizes, stating she was just admiring his outfit. It seems she likes him, and now considers him a very interesting person. Ryo is still overwhelmed by everything she's saying, but she tells him she has to go now, though she hopes they'll meet again. After that, Abel comes out to get him, And once back inside, he takes the opportunity to explain to everyone in the guild that Ryo is his savior, causing them to thank him and show their gratitude. After that's finished, Abel tells the receptionist that he wishes to recommend Ryo for D-rank registration. This greatly surprises her, for she remembers no one from the Crimson Sword had ever made such a recommendation, but Abel vouches for this boy, stating he's truly worth it. Seeing his confidence, she says there's no problem with the recommendation, but for the process, she needs him to demonstrate. He was forced somehow. Abel accepts, but tells him that he'd like to talk about that matter and more with the guildmaster. And as they wait for him in a private room, he bursts in, relieved to see Abel alive. After that, he introduces himself to Ryo as Hugh McGlass, guildmaster of the Elune Guild, and thanks him for saving Abel. Setting that aside, Abel tells Hugh that he wishes to recommend Ryo for a rank increase in his registry, which Hugh accepts, provided Ryo gives a demonstration. Abel agrees without complaint, but warns Ryo is stronger. But Hugh doesn't take his word for it that easily. That's when Abel shows him the magic stones they collected from the monsters they defeated along the way. Hugh examines them closely, but their size and unique color prompt him to ask if they're perhaps from wyverns. Even though Abel confirms they are, Hugh deduces that to amass such a quantity, they must have confronted something capable of devastating an entire nation. Abel reports that they hunted all the wyverns and that it was south of the Malefic Mountains. Ryo asks about this, not knowing the area, so Abel explains that after finding the road to Kailadi, he realized where they were, since it was clear they had crossed the Malefic Mountains. Hugh tells them that no one has ever made it across those mountains alive, and even experienced adventurers avoid that place unless there's a truly compelling reason. But when Abel asks if this isn't enough to promote Ryo, Hugh responds that, obviously, this is more than sufficient proof. At that very moment, some people burst into the room and the girl leading the way is greatly relieved to see Abel. He apologizes to Lynn, Tridja, and Warren for having caused them so much worry. Hugh figures they have much to discuss, so he permits them to remain and informs Ryo his arrangements will be handled. He then asks the receptionist Nina to bring the registration items to his office. As Ryo is about to leave, Abel tells him he wants to show him something after he's done registering, so he'll wait for him at the reception. Once Hugh enters his office with Ryo, he tells him that they are the Crimson Blade, Abel's party and the most popular in the city. Without much ado, Ryo asks if he can truly begin his journey as a D-level adventurer. Hugh tells him he knows how exceptionally strong Abel is, with his unique talent. However, Hugh is also well aware that Abel alone couldn't possibly have slain a wyvern. This means he must be incredibly strong, leaving his miraculous survival with only one explanation. He's simply too powerful, possessing more than enough strength to qualify as a D-level adventurer. When he gives his back a hard pat, he notes that despite being a mage, he's quite fit. Just then, Nina comes in to deliver the registration items. Seeing this, Hugh asks her to guide Ryo through the process, since he'll be busy with all the paperwork he has. Here, Nina introduces herself as a staff member of the Adventurers Guild and lets him know that the first step is an interview. Ryo tells her he's a mage, his element is water, and he doesn't have a place to stay yet since he just arrived in the city. Nina informs him that registration gives him 300 days of access to the guild residence, so she wants him to keep that in mind, and upon learning he's never been to a dungeon, she tells him the guild holds an introductory course for them every month. These courses instruct novice adventurers and explain what to keep in mind when exploring dungeons. So, she asks if he'd like to take it. Ryo eagerly accepts, and Nina informs him the course begins the day after tomorrow, having just enrolled him. Ryo is surprised when he hears the scheduled time, so Nina tells him there's a clock in the central plaza, and with that she concludes the interview. After that, she tells him they'll begin the registration itself, where he has to place his hand on the crystal she puts in front of him. Doing so activates a magical mechanism in the device, which engraves a personalized plate for him. Nina hands this to him, explaining it's his guild card, so he is now officially registered. Once they leave Hugh alone, he shows his relief that Abel is alive and acknowledges that he owes Ryo a great deal. That's when he recalls needing to report Abel's return, so he retrieves what appears to be a communication device from a drawer. Meanwhile, Ryo reconnects with Abel, inquiring about their next destination. Abel responds, stating he wishes to compensate him for accompanying him to the city, and second, to express gratitude for saving his life, thus intending to purchase him some clothes and a staff upon their arrival. Ryo asks why a staff, and Abel notes that despite his strength as a mage, he doesn't have one. Upon hearing that, Ryo agrees but clarifies that he doesn't need a staff to cast magic, and furthermore, he uses a sword for close quarters combat. Abel is surprised he can use a sword since he didn't know that, but he also notices Ryo isn't carrying one either. This makes Ryo pull back his cape to show him his weapon, but Abel says it looks more like a dagger, which leaves Ryo very confused. It's then that Ryo asks him something else, since he's realized there's a lot he doesn't know. A little later, Ryo carefully thinks over all the information he's gotten from Abel. He now clearly understands that the days in this world have 24 hours, the week has 7 days, and a month has 30 days, just like on Earth, so nothing changed. In addition, they also measure clothing in centimeters, which is a relief because the imperial system is trash, and if he adds the curry to that, he doesn't believe it's a coincidence. It's possible someone arrived in this world before him and influenced it significantly. Just then, Abel comes out of a nearby shop, and Ryo thanks him for buying the things he needed. That night, Abel takes him to a party that's being. Celebrating his return, he again makes clear he's their savior. After that lively event the very next day, Nina recounts to him that the other adventurer present, named Ra, regards Abel as an older brother, which explains why he was so amicable with him at the party. Following that, she escorts him to a room within the guild dormitories and announces to those present that Ryo will be joining them, occupying room number 15 from today onward. Hearing this, they introduce themselves as Niels and Eto, and act very welcoming about his arrival. Once Nina leaves, Niels can't help but gush about how stunning she is, but Eto quickly reminds him that she has plenty of admirers, and he, Niels, isn't exactly the most handsome among them, so he has absolutely no chance of her even remembering his name. Then he tells Ryo that since they'll be roommates, it's best to drop the formalities from the start. Ryo agrees without any issue, and Eto is relieved to see he's a good guy, since he doesn't want another roommate like Dan from room 1. Just then, Nina comes in to say another adventurer seeks lodging, who then enters and introduces himself as Amon. Niels, seeing him, insinuates that he's too young, something Amon doesn't deny, and tells them he just turned 16, almost as if he just came out of the womb. But his family died, and that's why he decided to come to Loon to become an adventurer and earn a living. Yeah, I didn't expect that twist before making the joke either. Nina tells them Amon will also be taking the dungeon introduction course and can therefore go with Ryo. Meanwhile, Abel tells the members of Crimson Sword about all the things Ryo did on their journey back. Lin finds these stories absurd and reminds him that although Ice Wall is water magic, it's so weak that a simple air slash would completely destroy it. For that reason, she finds it impossible that he conjured huge ones in the air to crush enemies. Despite that, Abel assures her that's what Ryo did, but she points out that magic can only be cast near the user. And while a spell can be projected, it can't be cast at a distance, as that would be impossible and defy common sense. Rhea asks him to calm down, to take a deep breath, but Lin also points out something else that's quite impossible: his piercing wyverns with ice stakes, since these monsters' wind barrier repels all magic. Hearing that, Abel remembers that fact, agrees with her, and reassures her it's what happened. Regia mentions that the only person said to be capable of such feats was the famous Infernal Mage. Abel knows that title and that according to rumors, that mage incinerated 1,000 Imperial soldiers with one spell, reduced a wyvern to ash with a single blow, and wiped a city off the map with an invocation. And considering all that, he thinks it's an exaggerated comparison, yet Regia comments that if what he says holds true, Ryo is indeed exceptional, and there's no doubt that perhaps, just perhaps, he could attain the same level. Although, if he were to turn against them, they believe the worst outcome would be an alliance with the Empire. But Abel tells them that won't happen, and the reason is because Ryo doesn't like the name of the Buhi Empire, which leaves them confused because that's not the main reason not to join an empire, you know? Abel isn't surprised by their reactions. He knows it makes no sense. Even after explaining, he still doesn't get it either,